Commander Jaren Voss adjusted the straps of his tactical vest as he surveyed the barren landscape below. The planet Lysara stretched out in shades of gray and bronze, its jagged mountains and rocky plains illuminated by the twin suns above. From orbit it had looked quiet, almost peaceful. Now, from the ground, it seemed like a place that had been waiting for trouble. The human reconnaissance team, small but highly trained, moved carefully across the uneven terrain. Jaren led them not as a dictator but as a man who earned respect through action. His eyes were sharp, scanning for any sign of the Xylar forces they were there to monitor. The Xylars were the dominant alien species in this sector, a proud and disciplined race known for their strategic minds and loyalty to their leaders. Humans and Xylars had been in a tense standoff for years, each side testing the other in skirmishes, espionage, and territorial displays. "Commander," whispered Lieutenant Mara Keth, his second-in-command, "I think I see movement near the canyon ridge." "Could be scouts." Jaren's eyes narrowed. "Not scouts. Too fast, too coordinated. Could be an advance team. Everyone stay alert and no unnecessary shots. We're here to observe, not provoke." The team spread out, keeping cover behind boulders and crags. The quiet of Lysara's winds masked the subtle hum of distant hovercrafts. Every sense was on alert. Jaren's hand rested lightly on his blaster, not in readiness to fire, but in respect for the fragile line they were walking. One wrong move could ignite a war they were meant only to study. As they crested a ridge, Jaren spotted movement below. Small, quick, and unusual. Not adult Xylars, they were taller, armored, and deliberate. These were smaller forms, lighter on their feet, and they darted with a strange combination of fear and curiosity. "Children," Mara breathed, barely audible. Jaren's heart tightened. Xylar children were never in combat zones without reason. Something had gone wrong here. He raised his hand, signaling the team to halt. Through the binoculars, he focused on one child in particular, a girl no more than 7 by human standards. Her scales, pale lilac in color, shimmered faintly under the sun. Her eyes were wide with fear as she froze in the open, unaware of the humans above. "Keep your distance," Jaren ordered softly. "We don't want to startle them." The girl stepped backward without realizing it and tripped, falling onto the rocky ground. Behind her, several adult Xylars emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn, scanning the terrain. Jaren's stomach sank. They were not going to wait for diplomacy. This could become violent in a heartbeat. Then it happened. A bright energy beam sliced through the air, aimed directly at the child. Reflexively, Jaren lunged forward, pushing her out of the path. The beam struck him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain erupted like fire across his body, and for a moment everything went white. "Commander," Mara shouted, racing to his side. The rest of the team fired warning shots at the Xylars, but the adults hesitated, clearly shocked at what they had just witnessed. No human had ever shown such reckless courage for one of their children. Jaren groaned, struggling to breathe. The girl, stunned and shaking, crawled to a safe distance behind a rock. She watched him, her small hands pressed against her chest, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. For the first time, she looked at a human not as an enemy, but as someone who had chosen to protect her, even at great cost. Mara knelt beside him, her face pale. "Hold on, sir. Medics are on their way." He shook his head weakly, his teeth gritting against the pain. "No, they need to see what humans can do." His voice was faint, almost a whisper, but firm. Even lying on the rocky ground, he refused to give in completely. His eyes flicked toward the girl. "Get her. Safe." The Xylar adults were silent now. Their leader, a tall figure with deep violet scales and sharp golden eyes, stepped forward. He observed Jaren with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. It was clear the alien could not understand why a human would throw himself in harm's way for a child of an enemy species. For a long moment, time seemed frozen. Then the Xylar leader signaled for the retreat. They pulled the children back, leaving the humans alone. The war had paused, if only for a brief heartbeat, in acknowledgement of the strange act of bravery. By the time the medical drone arrived, Jaren was barely conscious. He was lifted carefully onto a hovering stretcher and taken back to the human medical ship in orbit. Mara rode beside him, her hands gripping the edge of the stretcher. "You're going to be okay, sir," she said repeatedly, though her voice trembled. Inside, she was not so sure. As the ship ascended from Lysara, Jaren drifted in and out of consciousness. He saw glimpses of the Xylar child, her small figure standing on the ridge looking up at the ship, her eyes filled with a mix of fear, awe, and something else he couldn't quite place. He tried to smile, but the pain made it fade quickly. In the medbay, doctors worked tirelessly. Energy burns of this magnitude were rare, and survival was uncertain. Jaren's body had absorbed most of the blast, sparing the child entirely, but it left deep scars and internal injuries that would take months to heal. While he lay unconscious, the story of his act began to spread. Among his crew, whispers grew into tales. Among the Xylars, the legend started quietly behind closed doors. A human had protected one of their own children. What did it mean? Were humans capable of honor that transcended species? Could they be trusted or even respected? On Lysara, the girl, whose name was Lyria, returned to her mother, trembling and wide-eyed. High Envoy Kylara listened in silence as her daughter told the story, each detail piercing the proud mother's heart. She had trained her daughter in the ways of their world, in survival, in loyalty. Yet here was a human, her sworn enemy, risking everything for someone so small and defenseless. Kylara's first reaction was fury. How dare a human interfere? How dare they make a child a pawn of compassion? But beneath the anger, a spark of respect began to form. The stories her scouts brought back confirmed it. The human had survived, barely, but his act had changed something fundamental. It was an idea Kylara had never considered, that enemies could act with humanity, without expectation of reward. Meanwhile, on the human ship, Jaren slowly awoke. Pain radiated through him like fire, but he was alive. His first sight was Mara, watching him intently. "You saved her," she whispered, almost in awe. "The child. She's safe because of you." He nodded weakly, too tired to speak. His mind was already turning to the implications of his action. He had defied not only Xylar expectations, but human expectations as well. Humans were trained to fight, to survive, to prioritize mission over life. Yet he had chosen otherwise. In the quiet of the medbay, Jaren thought about the girl, about her mother, about what might come next. He knew that what he had done would not be easily forgotten either by humans or Xylars, and somewhere deep inside he felt the weight of responsibility, not just for saving a child, but for what his choice would mean in a war that seemed endless. Outside the medbay window, Lysara receded into the distance. Twin suns glimmered over rocky peaks, oblivious to the lives below, to the fragile hope that had been planted in a single act of courage. And somewhere on that distant planet, a mother began to watch and wonder about the human who had risked everything for her child. The ripple had begun. High Envoy Kylara paced in the tall silver chamber of her Lysaran stronghold. Her violet scales glimmered in the soft light of the ceremonial lamps. She was a figure of authority, pride, and fearlessness, known across Xylar society as a leader who never wavered. Yet today, a strange mix of fury and confusion stirred within her. Her daughter, Lyria, had returned from the battlefield shaken but unharmed. And Kylara had learned why. A human, a Commander Jaren Voss, had risked his life to save her child. The news was incomprehensible. Humans were their enemies. They were unpredictable and dangerous. How could one of them show such courage for a Xylar child? Kylara's first instinct was anger. Her child should never have been exposed to danger. The reckless human, the very idea, it was intolerable. She clenched her claws, pacing faster, her thoughts a storm. Yet beneath that fury, an unfamiliar feeling flickered. Curiosity, perhaps even respect. Lyria sat quietly on a cushioned bench, her small tail curling around her. "Mother," she said softly, "he saved me. He didn't have to, but he did." Kylara's golden eyes softened for a moment as she looked at her daughter. The fear in Lyria's voice mirrored what Kylara herself had felt. She drew a deep breath and addressed her child firmly. "You must understand, Lyria, the human is dangerous. This act, however, it shows something unusual, something rare." Lyria tilted her head, still wide-eyed. "I think he's good, Mother. He cared about me." Kylara studied her daughter. A human showing care for a Xylar child was almost unheard of. It defied logic, tradition, and expectation. And yet, the undeniable truth remained. Jaren had risked his life to protect someone weaker. That was courage and perhaps in a way honor. Kylara's mind raced. Could this human, this enemy commander, be trusted? Could a species they had fought against for decades possess qualities that aligned with Xylar principles? She did not answer immediately. Her mind was a careful balance of suspicion and intrigue. Meanwhile, on the human medical ship orbiting Lysara, Jaren Voss's recovery progressed slowly. He remained under close watch, his injuries severe but healing steadily. The medics marveled at his resilience. He had absorbed an energy blast directly to the chest, and yet he was alive, conscious, and alert. Lieutenant Mara Keth stayed by his side constantly. "Sir," she said one morning, "you've started talking again."
"And the Xylars?"
"I think they're talking about you too." Jaren gave her a faint, weary smile. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about the choice. The choice we make when it matters." I didn't think twice. She was a child, and in danger. "I had to act," Mara shook her head. "Most humans wouldn't. Most wouldn't risk their lives for an enemy's child. But you're different." Jaren closed his eyes briefly. "I didn't do it to be different. I did it because it was the right thing to do. There's a line between human and Xylar, between friend and enemy, but morality should cross that line." Back on Lysara, Kylara made her decision. The human's act could not go ignored. She could not simply allow the incident to pass as another anomaly in the war. She needed to see him herself. Her advisors were hesitant. "High Envoy, the humans are unpredictable." Meeting him could be dangerous. He is their commander. You could be putting yourself at risk. Kylara's gaze was sharp, unwavering. "I am not here to negotiate politics. I am here as a mother. I wish to understand why a human would risk his life for mine. For my daughter. That is not a threat. That is curiosity, and perhaps something more." The preparations were made for a covert meeting. A neutral zone was chosen, a small plateau halfway between the human medical ship's landing point and the edge of the Lysaran capital. Drones monitored the area, ensuring no sudden attacks would occur. Kylara descended with a small escort, her presence commanding attention. Even her own guards felt the unusual tension. Jaren was informed of the approaching visitor. He sat upright in his medbed, his injuries still fresh, yet his mind sharp and alert. "A Xylar envoy?" he asked. Mara nodded. "Not just any envoy. The child's mother. She's coming to meet you, alone without weaponry. She wants answers, and perhaps more." Jaren's lips curved slightly. "Then I will give her honesty. That is all I can offer." When Kylara arrived, the tension was palpable. Her golden eyes scanned Jaren carefully. She did not hide her suspicion, nor did she hide her curiosity. She was accustomed to seeing enemies as mere opponents to defeat or manipulate. Yet here was a human who had acted in a way that transcended those categories. "Commander Voss," she said formally, her voice steady, "I am High Envoy Kylara. I have come to understand your actions. Why would a human risk his life for one of my children?" Jaren met her gaze without flinching. "Because she was in danger," he said simply. "Because she is young, and because no one deserves to be harmed when they cannot defend themselves. That applies to all species. She is a child. I could not let her die." Kylara studied him. His answer was simple, almost naive in its clarity. Yet there was truth in it, truth that resonated deeply with Xylar values of honor and courage. She had expected excuses, political reasoning, self-interest. Instead, she saw a human willing to act purely on principle. "And you did this knowing she was an enemy?" Kylara pressed. Jaren nodded. "She is not my enemy. No child is an enemy. And yes, I am a human. But humanity is not defined by war. It is defined by choices. This choice was the right one." The words hung in the air. Kylara's guards shifted uneasily. In the midst of war, such philosophy was unusual. Yet there was a weight to Jaren's conviction that even the High Envoy could not ignore. Kylara's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "You are unusual human. Few in your kind would do such a thing. Few would even consider it." Jaren allowed a faint smile. "Perhaps. But sometimes the right act is simple. Simple yet dangerous. That is all courage is." For a moment silence stretched between them. Then Lyria stepped forward from behind a small rock formation, her small claws brushing the ground nervously. She looked at Jaren, then at her mother. Kylara's expression softened further. Her daughter's safety had been ensured, and she could see the bond forming, fragile yet undeniable, between her child and this human. Kylara turned her gaze back to Jaren. "If this act of yours is to be remembered, it must serve a purpose beyond mere survival. If it is only a fleeting moment of chance, then it means nothing. Do you understand?" Jaren nodded. "I understand." But whatever happens, I cannot regret my choice. I would do it again. The Xylar mother and human commander regarded each other carefully, two leaders from opposing sides connected by a singular act of courage. The wind blew across the plateau, carrying dust and whispers, as if the planet itself recognized the unusual event unfolding. As the meeting concluded, Kylara made a quiet decision. She would not reveal her next moves to her advisors immediately. She would observe. She would watch this human, learn from him, and perhaps, just perhaps, allow a new possibility to take root. One where humans could be more than enemies. One where courage and honor could bridge species. Back on the medical ship, Jaren reflected on the encounter. He knew that his actions had changed something, not only for the Xylars, but for himself. The war would continue, yes. The battles would rage on. But somewhere in the quiet spaces between conflicts, a human had proven that courage, empathy, and morality could transcend the boundaries of species. And somewhere, on the planet below, a mother began to wonder if trust, even in an enemy, could be earned. The neutral zone on Lysara had never felt so tense. A light wind carried the scent of dust and faint minerals, rustling across the plateau where humans and Xylars now gathered not as enemies, but as observers of something far more unusual, understanding. Commander Jaren Voss stood upright, still recovering from his injuries but moving with steady determination. Across from him, High Envoy Kylara arrived with her small escort. The atmosphere was cautious, yet charged with a curious energy. Both sides understood the importance of this meeting. This was not diplomacy in the usual sense. It was a personal, almost intimate encounter that could ripple through both civilizations. Jaren observed Kylara closely. She moved with poise and authority, yet there was an unusual warmth in her eyes. Her gaze directed at him was neither hostile nor indifferent. It was studying, assessing, and perhaps even questioning. Humans were known for courage, but could they also be trusted with empathy? That was the question her eyes seemed to ask. Commander Voss, Kylara began, her voice calm but firm. We meet again. I wish to discuss your actions. Not as a leader, not as a soldier, but as a human. Why did you risk yourself for my child? Jaren's reply was deliberate. Because she was a child in danger. Any child, Xylar or human, deserves protection when they cannot defend themselves. That is not politics. That is principle. Kylara studied him. The simplicity of his answer carried weight. She had expected complex reasoning, perhaps excuses or even prideful explanations. Instead, he spoke plainly, yet with a certainty that demanded respect. You understand that your actions could have caused war, Commander, Kylara said, her tone measured. The Xylar extremists would have seen this as weakness. And yet you acted, Jaren nodded. I understand, but I would not act any other way. Courage is not only for victory, it is also for right. I could not let a child die because it was convenient or safe. Kylara felt a flicker of admiration, though she would not admit it aloud. Humans were unpredictable, and this one in particular was proving that unpredictability could carry wisdom. She had fought countless battles, navigated countless schemes, yet here was a human teaching a lesson she had not expected, that morality could be stronger than fear. Lyria, the child, peeked from behind a rock, her wide eyes fixed on Jaren. She had not understood war before, not fully, but she understood bravery, and she had seen it with her own eyes. Her small voice broke the quiet. Mother, he saved me. He didn't have to, but he did. Kylara's gaze softened for an instant as she looked at her daughter. Lyria's innocence contrasted sharply with the hardened world around them. Kylara knew that this encounter was shaping her daughter's understanding of the universe, of humans, and of trust. Turning back to Jaren, Kylara spoke again. I wish to know, not for diplomacy, not for alliances, but personally, how can your kind, my enemies, show such courage without expectation of reward? Jaren allowed himself a small, reflective pause. Because sometimes the right choice is its own reward. Because life, any life, is valuable, and because courage is not only about fighting others, it is about standing for what is right, even if no one else will. The Xylar envoy's eyes studied him, the golden irises narrowing slightly. She had heard similar phrases from Xylar leaders, but they were often just words, intended to inspire obedience or fear. This human spoke with authenticity. There was no pretense, no calculation, just honesty. Kylara considered this carefully. Could trust begin with a single act of bravery? Could it grow between species when both had so long regarded the other as enemy? Perhaps. She did not answer aloud, instead choosing to observe Jaren's demeanor, his composure, and his sincerity. For hours they spoke, not of war, not of politics, but of children, of values, and of honor. Jaren shared stories of human principles, of moments when courage was more than just combat. Kylara shared cautiously the Xylar perspective on duty, family, and protection. Each conversation revealed surprising common ground. Despite the differences of species, despite decades of conflict, both understood the weight of responsibility for those weaker, those innocent. Lyria, listening quietly, slowly approached. She extended a hand toward Jaren, her small fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For saving me." Jaren smiled gently. "It was my choice," he said, "and I would do it again." Kylara observed the exchange closely. She had seen courage before. She had seen fear and loyalty. But what she was witnessing now was something different. Respect and trust crossing boundaries that should not have been crossed. And she realized that such acts could change not just individuals but entire civilizations. The conversation shifted naturally to the ongoing war. Jaren spoke cautiously, avoiding secrets but highlighting the humanity of his people. Kylara listened intently, weighing each word. Both recognized that the future depended not just on military strength, but on understanding and cooperation, even if temporary. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the plateau. Finally, Kylara spoke with measured authority. "Commander Voss, your actions and words will be noted. They challenge everything we know about humans. Perhaps this is a start. Perhaps there is more than enmity between our species than we thought." Jaren nodded. "Perhaps, but it starts with simple choices. Every act of courage, every act of kindness matters more than we realize." Kylara paused, reflecting on the human's words. She had lived by strategy, by precision, by the certainty of her orders. Yet this human, this commander, had shown her something she had never fully considered. That morality, courage, and compassion could be as powerful as any weapon or tactic. The neutral zone, once a place of tension and uncertainty, now carried a quiet sense of hope. Neither humans nor Xylars could ignore the impact of a single act of bravery. And while the war would continue, seeds of understanding had been planted. Seeds that could one day grow into something larger, something stronger than mere victory or defeat. As Kylara and her party prepared to leave, she looked at Jaren one last time. "This is not the end," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "But it is the beginning of something different." Jaren watched her leave, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. He knew the path ahead would be challenging. The extremists on both sides would not forget easily, and the war would not pause for philosophical reflection. But he also knew that one act of courage, one choice to protect a child rather than fight, had already begun to change hearts and minds. Back on the human ship, Jaren reflected on the day's events. His injuries were still healing, but his spirit felt renewed. For the first time in years, he sensed a possibility that the humans and Xylars could find common ground, not through treaties or battles won or lost, but through understanding and shared humanity. Lyria slept quietly that night, her small form curled safely in the care of her people. Kylara watched over her, her mind alive with thoughts she had never expected to entertain. She had always been a leader first, a mother second. Yet now she saw that leadership sometimes required understanding, trust, and the courage to consider the unexpected. And somewhere far above the planet, Jaren allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. A human had acted with courage. A mother had begun to see trust where none was expected. And perhaps, just perhaps, a child's life could become the spark that changed the course of more than just one day. The bridge between two species had begun with a single act of bravery. And the story was far from over. The fragile calm that had grown between humans and Xylars began to show cracks. While the memory of Commander Jaren Voss's courageous act still lingered in the minds of many, there were those on both sides who saw it as dangerous. Extremists, humans, who distrusted Xylars, and Xylars who distrusted humans, whispered warnings and plotted consequences. High Envoy Kylara sensed it first. In the quiet halls of her stronghold, advisors and spies brought unsettling news. Certain factions among her people believed that showing respect or trust toward a human was weakness. They argued that a human, Commander who had protected a Xylar child might gain undue influence, weakening Xylar authority. Kylara's claws tapped thoughtfully against the silver desk. We will not allow fear or jealousy to decide our actions, she said firmly. Her golden eyes burned with determination. Jaren Voss is not our enemy. Extremists may seek to harm him, but I will ensure they do not succeed. We cannot undo what has been done, but we can protect it. Her advisors nodded hesitantly, aware that she was choosing a path few expected. Kylara herself did not fully understand the human she sought to protect, but she recognized the value of courage and honor when displayed without fear or calculation. Meanwhile, Jaren continued his recovery on the human medical ship. Though still weak, he remained alert. Reports of unusual Xylar movements reached him. Mara Keth, ever vigilant, handed him a datapad. Commander, she said, there's chatter about threats aimed at you. Some Xylars believe you are dangerous. Extremists may attempt to strike. Jaren studied the reports, his expression calm but serious. They do not understand. Courage makes them uncomfortable. They prefer predictability, obedience, and fear. We cannot fight with fear alone. Mara frowned. But if they act, sir, they could take Lyria or even Kylara herself. Are we prepared for that? Jaren nodded slowly. We will prepare. And if they come, we will respond with strategy and intelligence, not just force. They may be strong, but humans have unpredictability. The next day, Jaren returned to the neutral zone for another meeting with Kylara. This time, the tension was heavier. Scouts reported unusual activity near the borders, signaling that extremists on both sides were mobilizing. Yet Kylara had insisted on the meeting. She wanted to ensure that Jaren understood the stakes. As they met, the wind stirred dust across the plateau, making the atmosphere feel charged. Lyria watched from a safe distance, her small form tense but curious. She had begun to feel a bond with the human who had saved her, a bond that no one could explain, yet it was real. Kylara's voice was steady, but firm. Commander Voss, the extremists on both sides view your actions as a threat. They will attempt to destabilize the progress we have made. You must understand the danger. They will not hesitate to strike if given the chance. Jaren listened carefully. I understand, he said, and we will act. But the human side of me will not compromise our principles. We do not fight children. We do not betray trust. We act with courage. Kylara's expression softened, a flicker of admiration crossing her golden eyes. You are consistent. That is rare. And it is why I have chosen to intervene personally. If the extremists act, I will ensure you are protected. And Lyria. The two of them began to plan. They would use a combination of human technology and Xylar strategy to monitor potential threats, anticipate movements, and respond swiftly if violence arose. Their alliance was fragile, but it was built on trust earned through courage and action. That evening, reports came in. A group of Xylar extremists had crossed into a nearby canyon, aiming to intercept the neutral zone. Their numbers were significant, their intentions clear. Kylara's guards mobilized immediately, but she also sent a discreet message to Jaren. The human commander would need to be prepared. Jaren gathered his team, their faces set with determination. Despite his injuries, he stood tall, issuing clear instructions. We will not wait for them to decide the battle. We will control the engagement, protect the neutral zone, and ensure Lyria and Kylara are safe. Strategy and coordination will guide us, not panic. Mara nodded. Understood, sir. Everyone is ready. As the extremists approached, the neutral zone became a tense battlefield of anticipation rather than actual combat. Sensors and scouts relayed every movement. Jaren and Kylara communicated silently, coordinating forces from two species, both aware that any misstep could escalate into a larger conflict. Then, the attack began. Extremists attempted to breach the perimeter, using speed and cunning to try to catch the humans and Xylars off guard. But Jaren's planning was meticulous. He predicted their movements, countered their tactics, and minimized risk to civilians. Kylara's forces complemented his strategy, blending Xylar discipline with human ingenuity. The engagement was tense, but controlled. Jaren moved among his team, issuing commands and ensuring every action minimized harm. His energy was focused not on aggression, but on protection and precision. He was a human guided by principle, and his courage inspired those around him. At one point, a small Xylar unit faltered under pressure. Jaren moved swiftly, redirecting resources and personally ensuring their safety. His actions were decisive, yet tempered by care. The extremists, expecting chaos, found themselves outmaneuvered by a combination of human unpredictability and Xylar strategy. High above the plateau, Kylara observed the unfolding events. She had never witnessed a human act with such balance, risking themselves, yet thinking strategically to minimize casualties. It was a combination of bravery, intelligence, and compassion that left her impressed. Lyria watched from a secure location, her small hands gripping the edge of the rock. Fear had not disappeared, but awe had taken its place. The human who had saved her once again showed courage, now tempered with skill. She began to understand the meaning of bravery and why her mother's respect for Jaren was growing. After hours of careful maneuvering, the extremists were forced to retreat. They had underestimated the coordination and resolve of the humans and Xylars working together. The neutral zone remained secure, and no innocent life was lost. Breathing heavily, Jaren surveyed the battlefield. His injuries were still raw, but his spirit remained strong. He turned to Kylara, who had approached him silently. "You have done well, Commander," she said, her tone carrying both respect and recognition. "Your courage is matched by your wisdom. I have seen few humans act with such balance." Jaren nodded, exhausted but resolute. "It is not only my actions. We acted together. Principles guide us, yes, but cooperation saves lives." Kylara studied him for a long moment. She realized that the bond forming between them was not just personal, it was a symbol. It showed that trust, courage, and morality could bridge even the deepest divides. It was a lesson for their people, and perhaps for the future. That night, as the plateau fell quiet once more, Jaren and Kylara shared a rare moment of understanding. Words were limited, but the respect between them was unmistakable. They had faced danger together, protected the innocent, and proven that courage and morality could unite two species long considered enemies. Lyria slept soundly nearby, her safety ensured. Her mother's careful observation and the human commander's bravery had given her a night of peace she would not forget. And somewhere, deep within the hearts of both humans and Xylars, seeds of hope had been planted. The war was not over. Extremists would continue to plot. Battles would continue across the stars. Yet one thing had become clear: courage, empathy, and honor could cross the divide between species. And in the midst of conflict, those qualities were perhaps the most powerful weapons of all. As the first light of Lysara's twin suns touched the plateau, Jaren looked toward the horizon. He felt a quiet determination. The dangers ahead were real, but his choice, to act with courage, to protect life, and to uphold principles, would guide him through whatever came next. Kylara, standing nearby, mirrored his resolve. The unexpected bond between human and Xylar, forged in courage and tested in conflict, had become a force neither side could ignore. Together, they had protected a child, ensured the survival of principles, and shown that even in war, humanity, or perhaps the essence of it, could prevail. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the story of a human who risked everything for a Xylar child continued to spread, inspiring whispers of hope and challenging long-held beliefs. The path ahead remained uncertain, but one truth was clear: courage and honor could shape the future, even amidst the shadows of war. The neutral zone had never felt so quiet. The threat of extremists had passed, at least for now, but the tension remained. Commander Jaren Voss and High Envoy Kylara stood side by side, surveying the plateau where the latest conflict had been narrowly avoided. The twin suns of Lysara bathed the landscape in a warm glow, painting long shadows across rocks and dust. Lyria sat nearby, her small form curled against a soft blanket, finally at peace. She had slept for hours after the events of the past day. Her breathing was steady, her face serene. Watching her, Jaren felt a quiet satisfaction. The child's safety was not only a victory of courage, it was a reminder of why he had acted in the first place. Kylara approached him, her golden eyes thoughtful. "Commander Voss, your actions have done more than protect a child. They have begun to shift perceptions, both among my people and yours. Humans and Xylars are seeing that courage and morality are not limited by species." Jaren nodded. "I did what anyone would do if they could. Protecting the innocent should be universal, but I didn't expect it to change so much so quickly." Kylara allowed a small smile. It was rare for her, a subtle sign of respect and trust. It is rare because it is unexpected. Few humans would act with such clarity and principle. Few Xylars would recognize the value of such acts. Yet here we are, and perhaps it is the beginning of something new. The two leaders walked slowly across the plateau, discussing the future. Both understood that the war would not end overnight. Extremists still existed, and political pressures would continue. But the seed of possibility had been planted. With careful cooperation, trust could grow. And if trust could grow, peace, or at least understanding, could follow. Meanwhile, scouts reported unusual activity on the outskirts of the planet. A small human convoy had intercepted a Xylar fleet attempting a covert attack. Jaren reviewed the reports, recognizing the pattern of extremists attempting to capitalize on confusion. "They are testing our coordination," he said quietly. "They want to see if fear will override caution. We cannot let that happen." Kylara nodded, her scales glinting in the sunlight. "Then we will show them that cooperation between our species is stronger than any attack. Together, we are more than they expect." Over the following days, Jaren and Kylara worked closely to strengthen the neutral zone. They coordinated patrols, shared intelligence, and set up safe zones for civilians and children. Lyria's safety remained a priority, but the effort extended beyond her to include every life that could be protected. One afternoon, as the suns hung high in the sky, Lyria approached Jaren. "Will you always protect me?" she asked, her small hands gripping the edge of the platform where they stood. Jaren crouched down to her level. "I will protect anyone in danger, Lyria, but it's not only me. You will also learn to protect others. Courage is not only about what one person does, but what we inspire in others." The girl nodded, her violet eyes wide with understanding. She had seen courage firsthand, and she was beginning to comprehend that heroism was not just a story. It was a choice. Kylara observed this quietly from a short distance. The bond forming between her daughter and the human commander was unusual, yet it was not uncomfortable. Instead, it carried a promise, a hope that compassion could cross even the deepest divides. As days turned into weeks, whispers spread among both humans and Xylars. Stories of a human who risked his life for an enemy child, and a Xylar leader who respected him for it, circulated quietly at first, then with growing awareness. Extremists on both sides remained, but their influence began to waver in the face of growing admiration and curiosity. One evening, after a long day of coordination and patrols, Jaren and Kylara stood on a ridge overlooking the valley below. The suns were setting, casting shades of orange and purple across the landscape. "You know," Kylara said softly, "when I first learned of your actions, I was furious. How could a human interfere in such a situation?" Jaren smiled faintly, remembering the blast that had nearly ended him. "I didn't think about consequences in that moment. I acted because it was right. That's all humans can do sometimes. We make choices and live with them." Kylara nodded slowly. "It is a lesson for me as well. Leadership is not only about orders and strategy. It is about understanding and sometimes trusting the unexpected. And you have taught me that." The two shared a quiet moment of reflection. They were still leaders of opposing species, still bound by duty and history. Yet the human and the Xylar recognized that courage, respect, and shared purpose could bridge even the deepest gaps. Suddenly, a distant alert sounded. Scouts reported an incoming Xylar ship, not marked as hostile but moving swiftly toward the neutral zone. Kylara and Jaren exchanged a glance. "They are coming to observe," Kylara said, "or perhaps to test us." "Then we will be ready," Jaren replied. not with aggression but with clarity. We will show them that courage and cooperation are not weaknesses, they are strength. As the ship landed, a delegation emerged. Kylara stepped forward, greeting them with authority and composure. Jaren stayed slightly behind her, letting the Xylar see that he was trusted, that their cooperation was real and deliberate. The delegation's leader, an elder named Velon, approached cautiously. "High Envoy Kylara," he said, his tone formal. "We have heard of the human commander who protected your child. Is it true?" Kylara's golden eyes met Jaren's briefly. He nodded slightly, silent but confident. Kylara answered, "It is true. His courage and principle are rare, and his actions have shown that humanity can act with honor. You are welcome to witness it." Valen studied Jaren carefully. He had heard the stories, but seeing a human standing beside the Xylar leader, unarmed, composed, and respected, challenged everything he had believed. "Then perhaps there is hope," he said quietly. Over the next several hours, discussions and observations continued. The delegation witnessed how humans and Xylars could work together, protect each other, and make decisions based on principle rather than fear. Each small action, shared strategy, coordinated patrols, and careful planning demonstrated a bridge between two species that had long been divided. As the delegation departed, Jaren and Kylara stood once again on the ridge. The sky was dark, but stars sparkled brightly above, a reminder of the vast universe they shared. "Commander," Kylara said softly, "I believe your actions have done more than protect a child. They have begun to change hearts. Perhaps one day the war will be less about victory and more about understanding." Jaren looked up at the stars. "It will take time," he said. "But one act of courage, one choice to protect rather than fight, can ripple across generations. We've started that ripple today." Kylara nodded. "And Lyria will grow knowing that courage and compassion exist in unexpected places. That is a legacy more lasting than any battle won or lost." The two leaders remained there long after the sun had disappeared, reflecting on the changes that had begun. They were not naive. They knew challenges remained. Extremists and skeptics would continue to test boundaries. Yet they also knew that hope, once planted, could grow stronger with each act of courage, each choice to act with honor. Lyria slept peacefully nearby, her small hands resting on a blanket. In her dreams, she saw the human commander who had saved her standing tall and brave. She saw her mother watching, proud and protective, yet learning to trust. And she sensed, in a way only children can, that the universe was vast, dangerous, and yet full of possibility. As dawn approached on Lysara, Jaren and Kylara made a silent vow to protect life, to honor courage, and to guide their people toward understanding. The war was far from over, but a single human's choice to save a child had changed everything. And somewhere in the stars above, humans and Xylars alike began to whisper a shared truth. Bravery, morality, and compassion could transcend even the deepest divides. One act of courage could ignite a chain reaction that reshaped the future. And in that knowledge, hope was born. Jaren looked toward the horizon, feeling the weight of both responsibility and possibility. He had taken a blow for a child, for an enemy, for something greater than himself. And now, standing beside the Xylar leader, he understood that courage could not only save a life, it could inspire change across worlds. Kylara stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You have earned respect, Commander Voss, not as an enemy but as a being capable of great courage. That respect will protect you and your people, as you have protected mine." Jaren nodded, silently acknowledging the bond that had formed, not just between him and Kylara, but between their peoples, through a shared recognition of honor, bravery, and humanity. In the quiet aftermath, the story of a human who risked everything for a Xylar child became legend. It was told in whispers, in reports, and in hearts across two species. And for Lyria, the child who had unknowingly changed the course of history, it became a lesson she would carry forever. Courage matters. Choices matter, and one brave act can change not only a life but the fate of many. The stars shone brightly above Lysara, a promise of new beginnings, new alliances, and the unyielding power of courage.